Hey, Rhian Wilkinson.
Hello, how are you
Welcome
all?
back. Good. Welcome back
Doing
to
well.
Footy Prime. It's been quite a week for you, hasn't it? Pretty important week, I think, for Welsh football. For those that don't know, where have you been? But our very own Rhian Wilkinson has just led the Welsh women's team to Euro 2025.
Yay,
It's the first time they've qualified for
Rhian,
a big tournament.
woo!
And listen, I follow a lot of the British media, you know that, right? And this is a big deal. It's getting a ton of press. So, how's the last week been, Rhian?
It's been a lot. I immediately, when you don't allow yourself to get sick when you're in tournament mode, and the day after, just got a cold, and so it's been a lot of media, incredible attention. These women have been on this journey for a long time, and I've parachuted in at the end. But watching them celebrate, and the staff that have been here for decades supporting this team, it's a pretty special thing to watch.
I got to tell you, we were texting with each other, me and Amy and everybody else, about how excited. I want to say I had goosebumps. I was watching all the video I could possibly watch, and it was just incredibly exciting, and just having to know you as well as we do, and we're just so proud of you. Like, it was just absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. No, it's one of those moments where the stars align, and it's also one of those games where everything could easily have gone the other way as well. It was just the football almost was secondary to just the will of both teams to just leave it all out there. It was crazy.
How emotional was that game?
For me, I found it. I was so annoyed with one of my assistants. It's hilarious, but with like 10 minutes of regulation time, we were 2-0 up. He's like, "Make sure you really enjoy this." What? And then they scored. I was like, what? That's the maddest I was all game. It was just
in the moment, Rhi, when he said it to you, did you check him on it?
Yeah,
you did. You're like, what the fuck are you doing saying that?
Oh, so you ruined his moment.
Yeah, no, for sure I did. I was like, what teams have you been a part of that you can rest for the last 10? Because I've never been a part of those teams. So yeah, of course they had to score, but it was emotional. Seeing these women and players like a Jess Fishlock, Sophie Ingle, who they brought in, all these their version of the Christine Sinclairs, and who they got it over the line for them. Sophie Ingles has an ACL. Jess got injured, had to come off early, and it was our youth who really got the game over the line, which is it's a special thing when you see that transition starting to materialize.
And when you came in, this was always the goal. Like, the goal was to have them qualify when they'd come so close. I think 3 cycles, not even before, but 3 cycles individually, like just so close to making it and then just not getting it over the line. So that, I imagine, was always the goal. Have you given yourself a moment, like in all this whirlwind, the press tour, to appreciate it, that what you've accomplished, but what they've accomplished as well?
No, I was definitely never in doubt what the reason for me coming in was. It was mentioned frequently, and I think I'm fortunate. I think we all are. When you've been in football long enough, you're like, yeah, look, I'm going to give it my all, and then there's the football gods, and then there's what have and it's been a lot of fun to just come into this organization. It's new, it's different. You're trying to find your footing. You're just fighting all the time for funding or for this or for that. It's every job in football is the same in some ways. But then it actually happening, it's not going to sink in for a long time because you've been building for it. And now there's Christmas, but equally at the end of February, we start our League A games, which have to prepare us for the Euros because we've been in League B. So the turnaround is exactly what we wanted, which is short and sharp. But there's never really a moment to take it in properly, especially with my family. They want me home. My mom's annoyed that there's no Christmas tree yet, and I'm like, oh, I'm not even there. they don't care. Which you really put your feet back on the ground pretty quickly.
In the barn. You need
in the barn, on the farm.
Yeah. So needing some yarn. So
Dr. Zeus.
I'm sorry, I planted the seed early on.
Keep going back there now. So I mean, this squad, you mentioned how much character it had, but when you look ahead now to 2025 in Euro, do you have an idea what your team, your squad would look like, or are there still many moving parts within the talent base in Welsh women's soccer?
3 years ago, In the entirety of the country between the ages of 4 and 18, there were 9,000 registered female players. So in the space of 3 years, we've doubled that, and we have ambitions to continue to grow it. But there's a reality, and like there is in Canada, you have to look at the pathway and you have to look at dual nationals. I was a dual national, as in I played for Canada, but equally I could have played for Wales and England through my parents. We just need to be aware to support that, and it's now getting the balance. We have to keep that Welsh togetherness. It is a Welsh team. It must represent the country. But equally, I need to be doing my due diligence to make sure that I'm supporting and propping up the team in certain areas, just because it's a tiny country. There's 3 million people here. And you know what? Women's sports is decades behind. So that's a huge goal of mine is during my time here in Wales is to make sure that I'm getting out to the schools and bringing attention to something which is not right, which is it's not equal opportunity sports in general, not just football here in Wales. So I have my idea for the roster, but I also need to make sure going into especially the first 3 windows that I'm getting out and looking at potentially a few new faces.
Are schools embracing women's football or not?
Some, yeah. I mean, it's changing. It's just really slow. I've talked a lot about, my parents moved us back to Wales when I was 9, and
Let them be late.
Rhian's flailing, listener.
to get the motion sensor on. I mean, there was no gym class for girls when I was there in the early 90s. And you come in now, right? 2024, things would change, and it's not. It hasn't changed much. So enough anyway. So it's just taking a long time, and I find it interesting because this is a progressive country. There's definitely some elements that are behind, and parents in no other avenue of life would accept that their boys have more opportunity than their girls. But for some reason in athletics, there's a cultural issue that we just maybe just need to make it more accessible and talk about it more.
I saw you at one of the many events I imagine that you've attended, and you're so good at it. Like, this is something I think that they can leverage, the Welsh FA, like not only your brilliance as a coach and your know-how, but how good you are with people, and like giving them like the model that you are, like as a dual citizen, the opportunities you had, and then now kind of forging your own path in coaching. But are you seeing, kind of to follow up on Craigor's question, a ripple effect of England winning the Euros in 2022 and what they tried to institute, or is that sort of singular and within the borders of England, and then Wales is still separate from that? And then I guess the follow-up question is this moment now qualifying for Euros the tipping point where you'll see the change and you'll see it happening with the next generation and in schools?
Well, thank you, Amy. You're clearly very biased, and I'll pay you later. But
I am, but it's true.
Thank you. I think the England women reaching or winning the Euros, they were prepared for that moment. I think Lotte Wubben-Moy, Leah Williamson, these women were ready to put out a sort of presentation on how the game had to grow and had to change. And our moment was qualification. Now, we won't be going to make up the numbers. Absolutely not. We will be the most prepared team there. And I can guarantee that. However, we can't force what's not there yet. There's a structural build that needs to happen, and you can't rush this piece. And there's some really good people here who are, have been, as I said, the numbers have doubled in 3 years, not just for participation, but across the FAW, just like how we get out into the community is going to take time. But what it will do, it will make us, it just puts us in the spotlight. It makes us visible. All of a sudden, I think young girls will have a catalyst that isn't English. Wales and England are very different. They share an island. That's about it. Like there's distinct countries, there's distinct people, and we can't follow the same path as England. Although I do think they did a great job of leveraging their moment, and it's how do we leverage ours in a uniquely Welsh way without trying to emulate anyone else.
Was there any pushback to you as coach being a Canadian, or was there such apathy towards women's soccer that it just kind of went under the radar?
I think it helps that my mother is Welsh. I think my press conference was a lot more about sort of my previous job with Portland and some of the media around that. So my first press conference was tough because there was a lot of questions, and 3/4 were maybe about a challenging coaching role before this one. But as soon as I got in the role and I said, I'll answer any questions and then I want to move on, because the players, I just don't want them to have to answer questions about that. Let's get back to football. And I have to respect that the organization and the media has been very good about, all right, I've been open and honest, and they respected that part. And then we just sort of got into the job, but not from the accent. There hasn't been pushback, and it does help that my mother keeps visiting me and insists she comes to work with me. So my mother is now known.
Can you speak Welsh?
Nope. But I have a few key words and I use them frequently.
Like beer and thank you and that kind of stuff? Like
Not
everyone else
beer,
does?
but diolch
No?
is thank you. Bore da, good
Okay.
morning. Prynhawn da, good afternoon. You know, these sorts of things go a long way sometimes.
The storm that just went through is Dara, right?
Yeah, Irish.
Sharms and I were talking on Monday, and I couldn't remember the name of it because it caused the Merseyside derby, potentially the last one in Goodison, to be cancelled, right? So we were talking about that, and I was like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure it's Storm, starts with a D. Storm Diolch."
Ooh, thank you.
Storm, thank you. It wasn't that. It was
It
Dara.
did feel appropriate to have an Irish storm come through afterwards. I have to say that it felt very.
We've had those over the years.
Yeah.
Normally, it's just Katie McCabe on the pitch.
Yes. Yeah.
Well
Yeah.
done.
She's a good player.
So back to the job at hand. I mean, is there pressure on the Welsh government and Welsh football to finance and to bring money into women's soccer, or is that still a real battle for you?
It's still a real battle, but yes, there's pressure for sure. And, cultural differences take a long time to change. A huge, I talk about it a lot with my family because, I'm from Quebec. My stepfather's Indian. There's always these little elements where you're like, well, why didn't he get this position in his job, my stepfather? Or like as a Quebecer, why were we getting slightly different treatment at some points in Canada soccer? Like a small example is like our medical coverage for the national team was always different, which is a weird thing, but because our Medicare was different. Anyway, all this to say, things take time, and my job is to push the boundaries and to fight for the women's game and to not accept what is or expected. So sometimes they're really happy because they found me funding, and that's great, but it's not enough. So then I'm like, I'm so grateful. Can we triple that? And so, which is annoying, but that cultural piece is for them. All of a sudden, we're like, but we've considered the women and we've put this pool aside for them. And that's a huge step. It really is, if you think of where we've come from. But then I've come in now, and unfortunately, they've hired someone who's Canadian, North American, who has a different experience. And so I do not accept that. And that's a challenge because I do have to. It's got a very small window here. I do have to remember where they are and where they were not very long ago. And I have to try and walk that line because it's also not okay for me to just be like, they tried hard. Like, that's not my job.
Rhian, excuse my ignorance. What does this mean financially for the Federation? Is there a bag full of money that comes with qualifying for the Euro?
No, and that is the challenge. UEFA does not have that kind of sort of bonuses for making the tournament. But what I will say is the women's game is growing. I think people, it'll sort of have ups and downs, as does the men's game, and people sort of get all dramatic about it. The women's game's not going anywhere. It's only going to grow, and it might have down years and up years, but it's on the increase. And what I think is quite blinkered in Europe, where the money is like the men's game is saturated. Like, those fans are born. You're a Liverpool fan at birth. You're a Man U fan at birth. All the boys are getting the kits. The girls don't have the kits yet. Like, they are not connected to teams. They're the ones that are going to be registering for the sport. They're the ones who are going to be now putting their money back into the sport. And ticket sales is a tiny piece of what will be a bigger sponsorship deal, a bigger sort of like sort of kit and marketing. All these pieces are not what's maybe always valued, or it's used very strategically, where they only count crowd size. And you're like, well, and TV audience. Those are only pieces of the puzzle. But UEFA definitely needs to start, I think, putting a little bit more incentive for the federations to support their women's teams, because they'll recoup it on qualification.
You've talked culturally about the resistance to maybe bring people on board to be true supporters of the women's game. Are you seeing it also in the corporate sector? Like, is there still a reticence to jump on board and to support the women's team with their dollars?
Well, first, I just want to clarify it. It's like when I say cultural resistance, it's an unknown. It's not like they're actively fighting against it. It's just they don't see that it's there.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have their eye on it. So no, I think a lot of companies are seeing an opportunity, probably ahead of most people. But again, the Welsh companies, which are the ones we really want to bring on board, they're almost slower than the international ones, and we saw that with the women's league. That's NSL. Obviously Dinah's a great friend of ours, and that was the same thing. She was like, "His Canadian companies are some of the last on board, because that's all they know." And so they're like, well, this can't make money. But actually the international companies were like, wow, this is a great idea. So often foreign investment are the first to see the opportunity, unfortunately.
When you got the job, how did you go about deciding on and picking your staff? How did that all unfold?
Well, as you know, when you get a new job, some federations allow you to bring in your staff, and some you inherit a staff. And I had a bit of a hybrid. So I brought in Adam Day, who's a great coach out of BC, Vancouver. Needed someone who knew me a bit, who I could have as sort of someone to lean on. I think that's important. But I also inherited the staff that was already there. And I've spoke very openly about my assistant coach, John Gray. I tried to thank him in the press conference. He and I had challenges. It was tough. Like, he had a new coach parachuted in who had different ideas than he did. And I had an assistant coach who was challenging in me I wasn't ready for. But I think the work that we did to try and like figure it out, and how I had to move towards him and he definitely moved towards me, highlighted, I think, exactly what the team did as well. Like, they just had to get on board. There wasn't time for reticence. There really wasn't. And I think it made us a stronger staff, but also entire team, because we had to work on it. It definitely wasn't like pure chemistry straight away. It was like, gosh, elbows out. This is going to be a tough one. And it was. We worked on it.
Was he the one that challenged you and late in the game to enjoy the last 5 minutes?
I won't say who it was, but they know who they are.
They're no longer with the team.
Yeah, they're not going to be here in the new year, so you know who it is.
They know who they are.
Hey, Rhian, so I guess you're the second most famous Canadian, spending lots of time in Wales these days, right? With Ryan Reynolds and the whole, or maybe you're more famous.
I'm here more than he is.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, fuck him.
Reaching out to him for funding opportunities. I haven't heard anything back
I was
yet.
going to say you should.
I
think, do you? Yeah, well, we often campaign him through this podcast about Canadian women's soccer as well, to throw money there. We haven't heard back from him either.
Yeah.
What
He
is
might
it?
get one or two requests, I think.
I think maybe. But you played Wrexham, right? I think the team played Wrexham.
We played in Wrexham, my very first camp, and I'm looking forward to bringing the team back there. It is a small country, but very different. I mean, even the accents. I have an assistant coach from Swansea, it's an hour down the road from Cardiff. And when he and my other staff members speak, the two from Swansea, I don't know what's happening. I have a clue. Wrexham, the north of Wales, is completely different. Very much like Quebec, in terms of the language is alive and well. I have 4 fluent Welsh speakers. They speak Welsh at home. And so English is their second language. It's different, and you have to respect that. So I'm really glad that we've done a good job of bringing the national team around the country to make it visible to all young people and all different experiences. I have a young player coming through who's grown up on a really remote farm. And amazing players, really going to be going to catch a lot of people's eye very soon, but had never really come off the farm. It's amazing. It's just different experience that I've had with the Canadian players. So that she does remind me how important it is that we make sure that the national team is not just catering to the South, where the majority of the population is, and the capital, Cardiff, but getting out into the different communities.
Do the majority of players play domestically? Rhian, I think we've spoken about this on the BroadsCast, aside from Fishlock, who now is re-signed a year contract with the Reign, right?
Yeah.
And then Ingle, who's injured, but she was with Chelsea. So aside from that, are most players based in Wales?
No, all my players are either in the NWSL. We have one in the USL. I've got one who's signed for a Canadian team already. I have one in Spain. I have one in Holland, and everyone else plays in England, other than one player who plays for a team in Wales, but is in the English league as well, Division 3. So
I also like sorry, Rhian, Craig didn't want to hear that answer from you.
No,
about all your team. He just walked away.
He's over it. Meanwhile, I'm waving.
Well, I had that really wrong though.
What
to clear that up? Yeah, is there domestically? Are there opportunities? Is there a pro league in Wales?
There is. It's called the Adran League, and I think it's really important. I enjoy going out to support the league. I think what we've talked about for the NSL, the CPL, these are really important leagues for our own system and the development of the players. The women's game is not quite ready to be like a direct pathway to the national team, but it is helpful because we do have 2 academies, a north and a south, for some of our top talents who then can start playing top level women's football when they're a little bit younger, and then they go into often English academies. But as Canadians, we all know what it's like being a Canadian to then go to the US and you're not playing unless you're above and beyond better. It's a real frustration for me that a lot of my players are, I feel, not as valued as they should be in the English league, and it's taken a few of them to leave to be actually seen for the quality that they have.
In many ways, a parallel for coaching in Canada, and how we only see the value in somebody when they have success elsewhere.
Yeah. I think in most careers, if we think about it, when you're developed within a country, you're just on the doorstep and you tend to look past them to try and find the latest thing or the biggest name. And unfortunately, you often have to leave in most things to be valued. And I think we've seen that from our players always. They always have to leave. Obviously, we haven't had a league. And it's always been the same as well for not just the technical coaching staff in sport, but also anyone with any job connected to sport, including broadcasting, often has to leave the country.
So with the Euros now, the qualification done, will that encourage dual nationals, do you think? Are you more attractive now as a team, as a club, to attract these players?
I can only guess. I haven't got any of them looped in yet or hooked, but absolutely. I think when you look at getting that exposure, that opportunity, it becomes a different ball game for players that are on the fence. And the parallel with England on the doorstep and the US on the doorstep of Canada, England has a youth age group for every age group. So boom, 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 boom. And so they can hold a lot of players in limbo because they're like, we're on the England pathway. And you're like, I know, but you're 24 and there's 3 players ahead of you who are all under 25. So you don't want to be the one who's like you gotta. So I try and always have extra spots on my roster to bring in players who I cannot cap. So it's just the experience. Come experience this opportunity of the team and the culture, see if you like it. And to just be there, like reaching a lot of outreach, just being in someone's eye line can go a long way, but it's a tough road because England does have resources that are far exceeds ours, that in that way they can also hold players almost hostage to their excitement of an opportunity. And what I tell the players is even them knowing that we're interested and sniffing around might accelerate their decision making on you. So it's just trying to give players realities, but not being the bad guy in situations as well. I don't want to tell them that they don't have a hope because it's not true. They all have a hope.
It's called the
Been a
it's called
professional.
it's called the Junior Hoylett syndrome. I think is what you call it. Because he was on the radar for a long time of England and had some good
Yeah.
years. I think it was QPR, wasn't it, or Blackburn? I forget now. And held on. Eventually, he said, "Okay, I'm not going to make England."
No.
And Canada came calling, right? Quite late, not late in his career, but he was very much in his prime.
Yeah, it is later though, and you think like, oh gosh, all these.
Yeah.
Like, there's a player I have my eye on now who I truly feel could make a direct impact on the team, and I can see the pathway. I work for the England FA. Like, I can see it's going to be a challenge. Other players that are, born Welsh and are, because they go to the academy so young, are part of the English system. We're using their system, so they use our player, like a Sydney Leroux, right? Like, it happens both ways. So there are some English-born players definitely on my team already, but equally there's Welsh-born players who are propping up the English system.
I remember when Ryan Giggs, the rumors were maybe he's going to become England international, early in his career, like, oh, come on, Giggsy. Then he chose Wales. Like, really? Come on. Break my heart.
That's what you feel, right? Like that's where, like, I remember talking to Janine because I was her youth coach when she was just like trying to decide, and so we brought her into the environment, and then Sink was there. Our camp was in Portland, so Sink came and spoke to her, and she was able to see kind of the culture that we were trying to build, and at first I think Janine took a second to like really connect to being Canadian. And now if you speak to Janine, and her brother's working in the CPL, I think, in Ottawa, they are Canadian. It's just, we have to do that work. That's on the coaching staff. Like, it doesn't matter where you're born. It's what you connect with. And if there is no connection there, then it's not for you. I will never force that. It's such a privilege to play for your country. So if you're not connected to the country, then it's not right. So it's trying to find that balance.
Well, Rhian,
you've worked well as the underdog.
Pardon me?
I said you've always worked well as the underdog, so this is right in your wheelhouse.
It's all I know. It's all I know.
Back home for Christmas, can you switch off from football for a few days or a couple of weeks, or not? We just have both eyes very much on the job at hand.
Well, I'll have a week, probably more, when I get home, of just sort of just getting a few things prepped, because we got to go early in January. It's gonna be quick, but my family really don't care about my job, and it's the greatest gift. I mean, really don't, and that has at times been frustrating for me, but equally during the ups and downs of a career, having a family that's just 100% has my back, don't care. Same reaction if we lose or win. That's it's a gift, because I get home for Christmas and there's definitely no one's given me time.
What about the nieces and nephews though? Have you kind of piqued their interest? Are they more interested in Welsh football?
Yeah, especially so I have a twin sister and her two boys. We lived in the same house. I lived in the basement suite in Vancouver, as everyone does have a suite. And so they've grown up with me. And so, whatever job I have, they want the jersey, and they're invested in it. But even then, they came to the two games a game against Slovakia. They don't really understand. It's just a cool experience to be in a stadium and to get a new jersey. So it's kind of perfect. They've already got the jersey. I don't need to get anything else.
I know we're about to let you go. Sorry,
Yep.
Sharms.
No,
but you just mentioned Slovakia there. And that was probably your most challenging time. I don't want to say it for you, but where for 5 years, I think I read this stat, we already mentioned Jess Fishlock and Sophie Ingle. The team hadn't played without one or both of them for 5 years. And then that matchup, that first leg, was the first time that you'd done so, and you lost 2-0. And you talked to, you guys just got the goal back at the end, right? So you thought, and this is a quote from you, that you thought that their huge desire to make history led them to play frantically and like the worst that you'd seen them perform under you. So how did you recover from that to not only come back in a second leg, win in extra time to go through to the final, and then kind of see it over the line? Like, what was your message to them before that second leg?
Well, I brought on board one of the best sports psychs I've ever worked with. Her name's Kate Green. And I brought her in after the Ukraine series because in that game we scored in like the 90th minute. And then the team like went crazy. And then we got tied in like the 94th. And you see how close they are to like just losing it because they've been so close so often. And they haven't really dealt with some of the past trauma, as in like you can say that's past, we got to look forward, but it's in your brain, it's in that trauma center. And I think they're not used to playing in front of crowds. They're not used to having expectation. As Craig said, they're used to only being underdogs. Like weirdly in Ireland away, 25,000 people booing, that was like sweet, zero expectation. Whereas when we are at home, we break the record, and then they play within themselves because they're bringing to the field all their families, all their past history, all this like expectation of like this is going to be it, and it's really hard for them to sort of just shake that off and just be in a moment. It's really tough to learn, and I've talked about imposter syndrome is insane. I mean, I have it. We all have it. These players have never qualified before. They've done that now. But until they had done that, I don't think they felt like they were worthy of. And they were always this like bit of doubt, like or like, oh, I'm cursed, I'm never going to go to a major tournament. Like that's the stories that they created. So Slovakia, that first leg, you're like, wow, like this is how close they are to just like tipping the balance. And that first game against Ireland as well, I would say like it's very hard to play a possession style against a high press, direct, like rock and roll team. You know, Ireland's like all at you, full throttle, big tackles, a lot of emotion. It's really hard to just be like, oh, we're just going to play around it, especially when you're not used to it. But that was sort of what we dealt with. What I was really pleased with, we had to beat them almost at their own game. I didn't love how we played in a lot of moments of it. We were better in the second half, but we just matched them to their energy. That's just all you can do. And sometimes you win ugly or you just find a way to win. And that's what this team needed to do with all the baggage and everything. Just put it aside. And they got in the ring essentially with Ireland and it became a boxing match. And that's not ideal, but Amy, we played for a team that was Ireland.
That's right.
You know, it's a successful brand of football. I think the women's game is moving away from it, but you can see how effective it is. And they had a woman who could throw the ball from half into the box.
I know. It was insane.
We prepared for it, but when we were preparing, I was punting the ball. I couldn't even kick it because it was so flat. I was trying to get this flat angle. I mean, it was a battle, and real credit to Ireland as well. It was too bad that these two home nations, only one could go forward, because the women's game, especially in like a Scotland, Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales, like these countries, it's big. It's really big for the development. So it was too bad it had to be against two home nations. But obviously, I'd much rather it be us than them. So.
Wasn't it Conn Smythe said, if you can't beat them in the alley, you can't beat them on the ice? Right now, you know you guys can beat them in the alley if you have to. It was
and we never lost it. Like we matched them, but no one lost their cool, which I thought was really impressive to a lot of the work that Kate's been doing with them. Is like we have to bring the fire, but there's a line to walk, and a few of my players were getting some hits that I might have lost my mind on had I been on the field. So pretty impressed with them and them keeping their cool.
That line was crossed when the coach told you to just enjoy it, right? That was the line. someone lost their shit, and it was you.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely heard a few things from me.
Well, there's only 30 or 40 seconds left, so enjoy it, Rhian. You're on Footy Prime, so.
Thank you all. I appreciate all the support from home. I'm very lucky with my community. Appreciate it.
Yeah, big year coming up. July 2nd is when it kicks off in Switzerland. Next year, but of course before then, lots of big games to go. So listen, Rhian, thanks so much, congratulations, and enjoy Christmas. Enjoy at least a few days to yourself.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Love you, Ray. Proud of you, friend.
See you soon, Abe. Bye.